Hello everyone. Now, sadly, they've actually closed PTS, so I wanted to make a video on the cruiser skills, but I can no longer open the server up and actually show you the base skills, so that's a bit awkward. But what I'm actually trying to execute here is, well, I've tried a bunch of the different builds, and what I'm trying to execute here right now is trying to get the Brawler skill to work. There's been a couple new skills added to the cruisers. There's been no changes to many of them, like, well, Last Stand is 1 point cheaper, which is nice. Priority Target is 1 point more expensive, which isn't that nice. Demo Expert has been nerfed a bit. It's 1%, but it's cheaper in return. Overall, the changes across the board are quite small. They're quite small because you still kind of want to run the same builds. There are a couple interesting new captain skills though. One of them is Brawler. It's a 4-point skill, which what it does is increases the ship's parameters if there are more visible enemy ships than ally ships within your ship's base main caliber firing range. And it's supposed to give you minus 10% dispersion and 8% maximum ship speed. Now, from the get-go, I thought this skill already seemed extremely questionable, because in order to get more enemy ships within your firing range than friendly ships, not only do you have to be positioned extremely wide on a flank, probably honestly pretty terribly positioned, but you also somehow have to get vision of the enemy ships. That's another thing. Not only can you be horrendously mispositioned, but you also somehow have to get vision of the enemy ships. Now, I figured, well, Petropavlovsk, at least it has the tankiness, and I'm gonna play a Petro, and I'm just gonna rush down a flank using the stupid tankiness of this ship, and I'm gonna try to activate this skill. I'm gonna try to make it work, which is why 3 minutes into the game, I'm already citadeling the enemy Hakuryu here. Because I am trying to make me Brawler. I'm trying to make this Brawler skill work. I thought it seemed questionable, and the more I've tested this skill, the more ridiculously poor this skill seems. You have basically no control of this activation. In order to even be in a position where this skill can activate, well, you have to be completely alone on a flank miles away from your teammates, and you have to be basically surrounded by enemy ships or have a ton of them pushing up the flank. But that's not quite enough because, well, for example here, I tried to push this flank, but a couple of ships decided to follow me. So I have a couple of teammates within range, and whereas I could technically maybe have 4 enemy ships within range, whereas only there would be 3 teammates, you can see that all those enemy ships in the center are undetected. I can't see any of the ships in the sea cap, and I would need to see them in order to activate this Brawler skill. So even playing this stupidly aggressive, hunting down the enemy carrier, sitting on a flank basically with a Minotaur who decided to push up with me, I still cannot activate this skill. This game was such a good example of just how terrible this skill is, because it's just completely unfeasible. It's 4 skill points, which is a very, very heavy investment, but you have no control of its activation. Somehow, you need to have vision of all the enemy ships you're fighting, while at the same time being out of vision range from your own teammates, and, of course, you can't, if you do this, you're gonna be the juiciest target for everyone to shoot, including the enemy carrier, and the skill doesn't really offer you anything against the carrier. So this skill is terrible. I got lucky enough that the carrier potatoed and I could just kill him off. I'm expecting the Vermont to honestly turn his guns and delete me here at any point. I still haven't managed to activate the skill. I've tried, but I still have not managed to activate the skill, no matter how hard I've tried. Just no chance of getting them. I'm activating the Kuznetsov special, which is Will for Victory, one of the most broken skills in the game, but I still can't activate the skill. There's 3 enemy ships spotted within my firing range if you look at the minimap, but I can't see the DD. The Harugumo is out of range. I figured maybe I should radar. If I radar him, maybe if I catch him, I could at least temporarily activate this skill. I'm really tempted, because the goal of this mission, I activate the radar and I catch the Harugumo, but you saw that the Minotaur left the range and got undetected. So once again, there's the same amount of enemy ships detected as there's teammates detected, so I don't get the benefit from the buff. Note that it only works when they're spotted, so once the radar would have run out, the skill would still have disabled afterwards. in the skill. Like, this is me wasting consumables and wasting my ship rushing down a flank with the sole purpose of nothing else than trying to activate this one single so-called Brawler ability skill, and I find it impossible. I feel like this skill is designed by someone who doesn't actually play the game. In fact, a lot of these skills give me the idea that it's someone who I honestly don't know what they were even thinking, because if I can't activate the Brawler skill in a Petro, which is pretty much the tankiest cruiser in the entire game, straight up rushing into the enemy spawn, and I still cannot make it work, in what exact ship do they think this is going to work? Like, how exactly do you expect this to work? If you have lower range, that means you have to push even deeper into the enemy team. It's like the guys that designed this brawling skill pretend like CVs don't exist and pretend like a cruiser can actually survive the level of focus fire you're under if you try to push into the enemy team. Spoiler, most of the time you cannot. Only there are a few exceptions like the Petra, which is honestly a bit silly. That's really the only one that can get away with doing what I'm doing here. For the rest of them, it really just doesn't work. So, Brawler as an opener, complete garbage. I can keep showing you this game. This is basically just me. I rush down the flank, now I'm rushing into the enemy spawn. Once again, I have only one purpose in this match, and that's trying to make this Brawler skill activate, and I'm straight up failing to do so, because I think it's basically impossible. Some of the other skills, there have been some interesting changes, like, well, they made Torpedo Armament Expert to a 2-pointer, and Torpedo Demolition Expert is a 3-pointer, so you can actually build a bit for the torpedoes now. I've tried some Zao torp builds, some Yoshino torp builds. It's pretty funny, but ultimately it's mostly meme builds. There's only really one ship where I've actually found the build to be somewhat decent, and that's the Irian. For those that aren't aware, Irian is a Kutuzov that instead of smokes gets deep water torpedoes and torpedo reload booster. On the Irian, you can actually somewhat build for the torps, and you can get some really silly torpedo damage out of it. But overall, the base builds are quite the same. There are some things though I will get into. There are some besides this this Brawler skill that I just wanted to start by highlighting, because I've seen some people say, oh, this skill might be good, but I find it to be absolutely terrible, absolutely dreadful. Even if I'm alone on a flank and kiting away, I somehow, well, first of all, like, we need to pretend a carrier doesn't exist, because if you're alone on a flank, carriers will just show up and kill you and force you to turn broadside into the enemy team. But let's pretend like carriers doesn't somehow exist, and you're alone on a flank. Now you need somehow to A, maintain vision of the enemy team, B, survive the incoming fire while maintaining vision of the enemy team, and C, somehow prevent your teammates from, well, if someone shows up and helps you, well, now you need to spot one more enemy ship to actually make the ability work. Basically, it's a skill that relies on you being horribly mispositioned and then somehow surviving through that situation. And even then, this build, basically the perk is going to help you run away. The dispersion is basically pointless because, well, you can't really fight. I honestly, I don't understand. The Brawler skill from the ground up is a absolutely dreadful design that I can't see myself running on any ship whatsoever. The other significant change for the cruiser tree is, of course, that fire prevention is gone, which means that super cruisers, not only do they have to endure these long duration fires, but they can no longer build fire prevention to actually have tankiness. So this will greatly take down the tankiness of the super cruisers. On the other hand, there is some nice new skills that you want to pick up, especially on the likes of Alaska and, for example, Stalingrad. And you can probably see that, well, my shells are doing a bit more damage than they would normally do, especially the citadels are hitting really hard. And that's because there is a new skill that is called Armor Piercing Cruiser. And what it does, it is increases the maximum damage of AP shells with a caliber of 190mm and higher by 7%. And it doesn't have any downside. It's just a 7% AP damage buff. And obviously on ships that shoot mostly AP, Alaska, Stalingrad, good examples. On these ships, well, this is obviously a fantastic ability. It just straight up a damage buff. So this, what this tree in essence does for super cruisers is it reduces their survivability, making them easier to burn. But on the other hand, it does bump up their damage output a fair bit. And as long as people are shooting AP at you, as especially battleships tend to do against cruisers quite often, well, the changes to survivability aren't really that noticeable, but the damage output has absolutely gone up. And well, I've had a great time honestly with the Alaska with this build. As long as you're not being focused by a carrier or killed by HE spam, the bonus damage has been very, very noticeable. The other change that you might be seeing is of course the reload buffs. There's another skill that is called Straight A Artillerist. What it does is it reduces the main battery reload time when an enemy is detected within the base detectability range of a ship. And what this does is, well, it has a passive effect first of all that gives you minus 10% secondary battery reload time. This is, I don't even know what they're thinking with this. What is the point of minus 10% secondary battery? Cruisers? What? It doesn't give you range? It doesn't give you accuracy? It gives you 10% faster secondary battery reload time. It is the single most useless thing I could imagine any cruiser getting. It does absolutely nothing whatsoever. It's basically a meme at best. But the important thing here is of course the minus 10% main battery reload time. And what this means is that you can actually make some pretty interesting combinations by combining armor-piercing cruiser and straight A artillerist. And if you're fighting someone like I was fighting, for example, that Georgia within a range, or well, on many other ships as well, you can just get a straight up damage buff. And you can basically stack multiple damage buffs on top of each other, giving yourself a fair bit of damage at the expense of your concealment. Some good examples of this is of course the Henry, that has a legendary that gives you better reload at the cost of concealment, or for example the Hindenburg here, where you can run the legendary mode, which gives you a lot of tankiness, but it doesn't give you any concealment whatsoever. Add in other skills like, for example, Demo Man, which increases your maximum HE damage by 10% and SAP by 10%, but increases your detectability by 15%. You can make these builds, like for example this Hindenburg build, where my concealment is basically 20 kilometers. That means I'm spotted from the moon. But it also means that every time I fight someone within my firing range, they're gonna be within my detectability range, which in return will proc straight A artillerist. And what this means is that, well, you can get some absolutely stupid DPM. We're talking 8% from straight 8% reload from straight A artillerist. We're not even gonna mention the secondaries, they're so pointless. And then you got 7% DPM on the AP, which means of course your AP hits like an absolute truck when you get to use it. And then we get the 10% HE DPM. And all of this means that yes, you're spotted from the moon, but your damage output has gone really, really high. And the amount of damage you can pump out in the likes of, well, for example, Hindenburg is very, very high. Same with, of course, Henry. Basically all these ships that can stack a lot of reload and damage buffs on top of each other, who don't necessarily need the concealment as much. The Henry build was extremely meme worthy. Sadly, I played a couple of Henry games, but sadly because Wargaming, World of Warships deletes replays if you have over 30 of them, and I forgot to save it. We kind of missed out on that, but Hindenburg kind of can do many of the same things, because this is basically a no concealment Hindenburg build. This is being spotted from the moon, but in return having as much damage as possible. And of course, I also have Gunther Lutyens, so if I do get enough hits in, my damage will become really, really high. And Hindenburg is actually pretty nice for this, because Hindenburg's AP alpha is already naturally very, very high. So when you add in 7% extra damage on it, well, obviously 7% on a really high alpha is a lot of extra damage. And Hindenburg becomes quite a monster, and it's been a lot of fun to play it. I mean, obviously you're still extremely vulnerable, especially now with all these battleships running these sniper builds. But regardless of that, I've had a lot of fun playing this build. Basically, you don't need to care about concealment at all. If you're spotted, or basically you never need to stop shooting. If you can see someone, just shoot them, because you're going to be spotted regardless. You don't have to worry about bloom, you don't have to worry about cover, or am I in cover or not. If you're not in cover, you're going to be spotted instantly. If you can be spotted while shooting, you can be spotted normally. So the only thing you really need to care about is just shooting all the time. That is the only thing you need to care about. Should have loaded H here, was a bit greedy about pinning him through the booty. But regardless, I actually quite like this synergy. However, the problem, of course, with ships that have absolutely no concealment and instead have increased HE damage, AP damage, and all of this, is that, well, you're not exactly going to be pushing in with them, and it's not like battleships are going to be pushing into you either with the new sniper skills. And Alaska and Stalingrad, even though I mentioned their increased damage and all that, they're lacking fire prevention. So what this all kind of leads to is more passive gameplay, also for cruisers. And but I didn't demo man, of course, it doesn't actually increase the detectability of guns with higher caliber than 149mm, which means that the likes of Colbert and Smolensk, well, they just get 10% extra DPM. And keep in mind, ships like Venezia, well, 10% SAP is kind of scary as well. So the TLDR is the damage output went up, so basically even less incentive for a battleship to even try to push in to any sort of shenanigans that you're seeing. And considering they've got their own sniper skills, why would they push in? I'm not really sure if I agree with the direction that this skill tree seems to be going in. And finally, of course, I did try going for the full AA build. Basically, when I mean full AA build, I'm saying I gave up everything. I gave up reload just to get extra AA power, and I gave up, I think, the better dispersion just to get the extra faster reinforcement sector. I gave up everything I could, and I took a ship renowned for its AA like the Worcester, and I tried my best to fight the CV. Obviously, it's still basic issues there, like plane spotting, meaning playing a light cruiser with plane spotting is extremely painful, but also the simple fact that the planes are so much faster than you that if the carrier decides to strike someone else, well, you don't even really have time to react before he's already executed the strike, and you will not be able to help out before it's basically too late. And of course, the issue with long-range AA still being useless means that, well, you can't really defend teammates against strikes either. If the carrier wants to strike someone and you're not basically right on top of him, it doesn't matter how many consumables and how much stuff you pour at the planes, they always do get their strike through regardless. The biggest issue here is, obviously I was trying the new AA Gunner skill, which gives you 20% continuous and 20% flak, and then there's the AA Gunner's Training Expert, which increases reinforcement sector, and then I even had, and then this AR, didn't really kick in too much this game, but it would improve your continuous, but it honestly doesn't do quite enough. But this is a build which basically sacrifices all other parameters to build against one single class on the battlefield, but even so, most of the time, unless I basically got to fight only him, and even oftentimes when I was fighting only him, he still got a strike through. This game I was mostly fortunate that he was whiffing when he was going for the strikes, but even then I found that, well, in situations where I'm fighting other ships or I've taken damage and I've lost some of my flak, basically I was preoccupied with the 11 other ships on the map, which tends to be the case because ultimately the carriers are only supposed to be one. When those situations happened and the carrier got to, in any way, got to line up a strike, the strike still went through. So the full AA build is, it's not a counter. It's kind of like torpedo belt. When you build full AA, you get slightly better torpedo belt. You mitigate the strike a bit more. It's not a counter. It is absolutely not a counter. Reinforced sector, full firepower, and the rocket plane strike will still come through, and I will be forced to angle. But it still goes through even with all that, with the new AR kicking in and with the full build. So obviously no form of hard counter here, just a bit more mitigation. So obviously that is pretty underwhelming and pretty depressing, and that means that the carriers will obviously still be the top dog, and there is no return to the old cruisers with their powerful AA, and that makes me sad indeed. Overall, Bit sad that they closed down the PTS today, so I didn't get to kind of show you guys the tree, but I mean, it's very easy to find on the devlog page, or just, well, I did post a fair bit of pictures in this vid as well to show it. Overall, the difference seems to be that we're moving away from tankiness on the battlecruisers. They're basically nerfing them, which I'm pretty okay with, but some of the skills, like, I don't even know if they've played the game. Like, the Brawler skill might be the silliest thing I have ever seen. The very concept of trying to brawl in a cruiser, like, you add all these sniper skills on BBs and then you add brawling skills. You nerf the secondaries on the battleships, but then you add a brawling skill. Like, on a cruiser, it really doesn't make any sense at all. It could just be a trigger. If X amount of ships are targeting you, you get a buff. That could be fun. Like, that could work. If 2 or 3 ships are targeting you, you get a bonus to maneuverability or speed or whatever. Things like that might work, but this current brawler skill, and also the other skill, increasing your secondary reload, like, what cruiser benefits from secondary reload again? Even the German cruisers, the Eger once had secondaries, but Wargaming nerfed those. I really don't understand the whole concept of some of these skills. It's and then they've renamed a fair few of them as well. Don't really understand the reason for that. Overall, the skills that you used to run, you're still gonna be running, with few exceptions. The new concealment builds are quite fun, but that obviously means that you're gonna be playing fairly far away, because it's very hard to push in a cruiser with all the 457mm guns and being spotted from the moon, which obviously makes you a very juicy target. So I feel like we are just moving into even more passive gameplay. Yay! Anyways, as always, thanks. This was all for me but probably until after Christmas. I wish you guys a very Merry Christmas, and I hope you guys have a fantastic time. Watch out for the evil bug, but other than that, hope you guys have a great time with family or friends, or even just by yourself. Merry Christmas, everyone, and thank you for watching.